actually started back in, I would say around in 2011 or 12. I got a call from my agent at the time, who's still my agent, asking me if I ever heard of a TV show called Hee Haw. My grandfather was a vaudevillian and loved that sort of vaudeville comedy and kind of introduced it to me at a very young age. And we used to watch, when I was a very little kid, we used to watch Hee Haw together. I said, yeah, I know what it is. And they said, well, the Grand Ole Opry Entertainment, owns the rights to it and wants to turn it into a Broadway musical. Are you interested in meeting on it? And I said, yeah, of course I'll meet on it. And I said, I love that kind of humor, that fast-paced humor, but what I don't want to do is a variety show. I want to do a book musical. And they said, basically, do what you want. I took like the next year and a half, and just created a story about a fictional town. And then we decided we needed to get composers. What they wisely said was, we want to get authentic country artists to then come in and learn how to write Broadway, as opposed to Broadway artists who are trying to sort of imitate country. So I went to Nashville and I met with some good old boys. I met with some like real hardcore Nashville songwriters, and then met with Brandy Clark and Shane McAnally. And it was love at first sight. We were all out, proud, gay artists. We instantly started batting around ideas, and I just fell in love with them. And I said, okay, we're gonna write this together. And about another year passed, and we had our first meeting about what was then called Hee Haw the Musical. And then ultimately, we decided to do what's called a 29-hour reading. So you spend 29 hours of a week rehearsing it, and then you invite people in from the industry to watch it and see what you have. And we ultimately did a production of it at Dallas Theater Center in Dallas, Texas. And what happened there was we sort of lost our vision for what the show was, because we were, I think, somewhat locked to source material and to a perception of that source material and all that. And we realized we're going down the wrong road. It's just not gonna work. And we sort of all said, well, we tried, and went our own ways. And then about 2 years passed. I went off and wrote Tootsie. Shane and Brandy went off and got many, many Grammy nominations. And we all sort of lived our lives and went on until the world started to change. And the country started to change. And I started to feel this incredible divisiveness and vitriol taking root in the country. And I was like, I'm a writer, I gotta write about this. And nothing made me happier than my experience of working with Shane and Brandy. So I called them, I said, let's start over. Let's just keep a few of the elements that we loved, the energy of the comedy, and write a show about how we're feeling about the shift that's happening in the world. Shane's husband knew our producer, Mike Bosner's wife, and Shane was talking to her about it, and she went home to Mike, who had just had a massive success with Beautiful, and said, this guy's talking about this show. You love country music. I think you might like this. So Mike said, send me a script. So we sent Mike Bosner a script, and he said, I want to do this. And we said, are you sure you want to do this? It's an original musical with, not based on anything. And he said, I connect to the story and why you want to tell this right now. So then he brought on Jack O'Brien and Jason Howland and Sarah Ogleby, and we put this team together. And for the next 2 or 3 years, we worked on creating what would now become Shucked. And we did many versions of it. And then we had plans to go out of town to Washington, D.C. to preview the show pre-Broadway, and COVID happened. It's almost a blessing that we didn't do the show when we did, because it started to suddenly grow in a completely different direction. And that production we were gonna do in DC became a whole other production. And then we did a couple of workshops, and then did a production at the wonderful O'Neill Center in Connecticut, where they just let us have their space and their barn, and we played and see what would happen. And then Mike knew somebody at the Pioneer Theater in Salt Lake City, Utah, who had a show drop out, and they said, come and do it here. And I was terrified. I was like, Utah, I'm a little nervous about that. It's conservative, it's very Mormon heavy. Will they get the humor? Will they get the story we're trying to tell? And we went, and Jack mounted the show in Utah, and it was a success. You could feel their arms unfold as the comedy got bigger and bigger. And it is a little blue in places, gets a little bawdy, but it's never mean, it's never cruel. And the score is just so beautiful and funny and heartfelt. And people started to say, wow, there's a story here about community and family and what it means to open your heart to people who are different than you so that you can grow, which is sort of how I got the analogy for corn. We opened successfully in Salt Lake, and we were coming to Broadway, and we were like, okay, it's post-COVID. Theater has not come back economically the way we want it to. We had a show with no underlying rights, so no source material, no stars other than wonderful Broadway actors, and really nothing other than a picture of a corn cob. And our producer, Mike Bosner, said, this is how we're going to market this show. Let's make a brand out of this. And so what he did is really wisely. He knew how to use social media, how to use advertising, how to use marketing to target an audience that would buy into the mystery of it. The corn musical, what's that about? And it quickly went from, what is that about, to, you got to see that. And it just started to grow. The laughter became infectious. People started coming back 2 or 3 times dressed in corn costumes and bringing cans of corn with them. And it became sort of like Rocky Horror for corn. It became this thing where the audience became really invested in the characters and the story, and it became their show. 9 Tony nominations later, that's how Shucked the musical started. From a little meeting with the president of Opry Entertainment saying, have you ever heard of Hee Haw, to a completely different show that still celebrates Heartland America and country music, as well as it's a Broadway score with country influences, an incredible cast, and a story about community and family that people seem to be resonating with.